Well, this week drew the attention of animal lovers to the image of a dog clinging on to his owner after she decided to surrender him to the SPCA. And the image has gone viral with millions of views. Whiskey's owner was struggling to feed both of them, and with the assistance of the Garden Route SPCA in George and hundreds of donors, they can now remain together. So the story has turned the spotlight on the impact of COVID-19 on the lives of animals. Despite being a nation of animal lovers, animal cruelty and negligence remains a harsh reality in this country. So the COVID-19 pandemic and its associated lockdowns have seen reports of negligence and a cruelty spiral. So to talk about this, we have manager of the NSPCA Training Unit, Morgane James. Thank you so much for coming through.
Colin, thank you so much. It's great to be here with you today.
All right, let's just take a review on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and the whole lockdown levels on animals and their owners.
Sure. I think there will still be so much research that is undertaken of what's happened in the past year and a half across the world. None of us expected this. None of us had planned for this, obviously. In terms of animals, we saw some great acts of courage and kindness, and we saw some really terrible cases of abuse and abandonment. Colin, you'll know that as essential service providers throughout the whole COVID pandemic, we were operational. Our staff were on the front line every single day, putting themselves at risk, and under these kind of circumstances, they were dealing with incredible cases of abuse linked to the domestic violence, which we know increased dramatically, gender-based violence. We had our staff going into these situations trying to rescue animals, working with the police, trying to find solutions to help the victims in these crimes, both people and animals, because where you're finding abuse of one, you're finding abuse of another. There is such a strong link that we cannot ever neglect. We must never shut our eyes to this.
Let's talk about the perception and also what may seem to be a reality, that owners that are well off are likely to take care of their animals better than those who are struggling, as is the case study regarding whiskey here. Then you look at the notion of how do you have money to feed your family, and on the other hand have money to buy cat or dog food. And I'm talking about a scenario where the owner has to eat first and the dog will eat later, which is somewhat of a nutritious meal that consists of bones. But then you know, as an animal nutritionist, partly that also the issue of bones has caused the stir, that bones can choke the animal to death as well, and the dangers that come with it.
Yeah, this is very true. I don't think it's fair to say that people who have a lot of money necessarily take care of their animals better. They're in a financial position to feed their animals well, but those two don't necessarily go hand in hand. We do a lot of community work with really, really wonderful, caring people who are reaching out to us in this time, people who've been retrenched, people who are not able to get to their jobs due to COVID. And they reached out and they said, please, you have to help us. We're desperate. We need your help to keep our animal member still in our family. And in these situations, we have to be really mindful that the animals form, in many cases, an integral part of that family unit. So we have two situations. We have people in communities who genuinely and sincerely care for their animals and do the very best that they can. Others who are not in that position and where the lives of the animals are challenged and they are neglected and abused. So every single scenario is different. And across the country, SPCAs have been working throughout this time trying to reach into those communities to support as many people and animals as possible.
I do take the point that it may not necessarily mean that people who are well off don't take care of their animals well. But again, there's an argument that one can put forward that animals have medical aid. They have spas. They get washed with shampoos and a hair dryer on them, and they get to go on a motor ride, hanging, clinging outside the window there with their tongues wagging. And that's the kind of nice life situation that people who are aware of can subject their dogs to. However, there are people who are struggling, who don't afford that, even letting their dogs to come and sleep on the bed, let alone their dogs sleeping in their house. The dog has to sleep outside because that's what it was born for.
Yeah. So, Colin, this is a big thing. The focus of a lot of our work has been in community areas where people lack the resources. Very often they've lacked the opportunities to fully be able to embrace what animals need in different circumstances. And of course, the work that we do, we speak about farm animals, we talk about wild animals, and we talk about domestic animals. But in the community areas that we've working and we really focused a lot during COVID, we found that people are in desperate need of assistance. And we can't get away from that. And that hasn't changed. That, in fact, is increasing. And we need to increase our reach for that because it's terrible, but the situation is getting worse in many cases.
Yeah, and also let's talk about those rural animals and township animals as well, which don't even have access to being vaccinated, and that don't have to eat at home, but rather can feed from dumping sites and dust bins. As a result, you see dogs that are stray. So the issue of stray animals is it's not strange to other people who are just ordinary and don't really afford that license to pay as a dog owner. So I'm trying to actually draw a parallel here that animal abuse on one hand can be avoided in as far as dwellings and perhaps, shall we say, the living standard measure of one person, whereas on the other hand, animal neglect can also be influenced by other people's economic situation.
Yeah, that's very true. And some of the problems that we're seeing specifically now is that people who are not necessarily in a position to help themselves, never mind their animals, these are the people that are really in dire straits. So we have good people who want to do the right thing, who want to be responsible with their animals, but they're just not financially able to do so. And this is where we're trying to bridge the gap. We're trying to step into that void, which we have historically always done. The SPCA works in areas that historically have been very poorly serviced because people want to keep their animals in many cases and they don't know how. We're finding neglect because people do not know how to care for them. And that's where education comes in. That's where training comes in, where we can help people to understand what is needed and what they can do. We're talking responsible animal ownership because, having animals walking through the streets, having animals that are underfed and poorly cared for, that impacts not just on that animal but on the health of the community. And those are all important things that we have to factor in. So community education is very important. So we look at the individual, but then we look at the bigger picture with the community as well.
All right. So going forward then, how are you going to enhance the level of the relationship of the NSPCA as well as members of the community for that regular interaction, especially with taking care of the animals as well as continuing with the education that you have in place?
That's a good question. We are so blessed to have had the My School, My Village, My Planet really reach out and partner with us and support us so significantly in terms of our inspectors and field officers. We cannot, throughout the country, we cannot keep up with the demand from community members, the demand to be across the country helping animals and communities. We are too thin on the ground. There's not enough people. So we are very blessed to have had this funding, and we are now in a position where we can start training more field officers and more inspectors. So more feet on the ground means greater areas covered, and it means more animals reached. So this is really something that is going to so significantly impact on communities, people and animals throughout the country.
Right. Thank you so much for making time to speak to us.
It's been wonderful to be here today. Thank you so very much.